Of Blood and Steel, written by Seymour Zainali, narrated by James Lawrence. Chapter 4. Alone in the Dark. Arda was ready to leave the hollow. A week was certainly long enough in such a dreadful place. Aside from the endless, unsavory characters, she was starting to worry about the child's well-being. The air was far from clean and clear, and the infant had developed a nasty cough. It was no longer safe. She needed to get back to the surface and make her way to the iron gates on her own. As she packed her things, she cursed Balak for turning her down. She felt as though she were marching to the gallows in her endeavor, and was deeply angered by this unnecessary sacrifice. Necessary or not, however, she was willing to lay down her life for the child. She kept the child close, fastening her blanket around her waist and shoulders to make a sling. She grabbed her heavy satchel and pulled on her cloak, wrapping it around her and the sleeping child. Her large wooden spear in hand, she hooked the infant's basket across her back before making her way downstairs to settle her tab with the innkeeper.
"Leaving us then, eh?" he asked. "Find what you were looking for?"
"That's none of your concern," she scoffed back.
"It's like I said the first night you showed up. There's nothing of any worth to be found in the hollow these days, be that a thing or a man. All is broken down here."
"Farewell." Arda slipped a coin pouch across the bar and walked away.
"Farewell, lass. Probably best you get out of here while you can. It seems as though you've been attracting some attention."
She turned and walked back to the bar. "What attention?" The innkeeper held out his hand. Arda rolled her eyes, pulled out 3 extra coins, and placed one on the bar. "Talk."
"It's just there was a fellow in here earlier looking for you. Messy hair, large sword. It looked like the nasty sort, so I told him I hadn't seen you."
"What did he say?" The innkeeper looked at his hand again, so Arda slipped him a second coin.
"He asked if the girl with the baby was here. I said I hadn't seen you, and he left in a hurry."
Arda slipped him the third coin. "I trust you still haven't seen the girl and the baby?" she asked. The innkeeper looked down at the coin.
"I certainly have not."
"Keep it that way," Arda ordered, and rushed to the exit.
"Good luck getting out of here alive. You're going to need it."
He laughed a hearty laugh from the pit of his stomach. As she left through the door of the Miners' Tavern, she whispered to the child, "It's just you and me now." Disappointed that she had to leave empty-handed, she was overjoyed to leave all the same. The hollow was no place for her, and certainly no place for an infant. As she passed through the hustle and bustle of the market, she stared up at the great elevators. They lay idle and dormant, the immense ropes on their pulleys stretching to the ceiling and fading into shadow. They would save her a lot of time, though their hobbled-together construction looked a touch too perilous for her liking. She took a big breath as she headed toward them. The streets of the hollow made her feel uneasy. She heard men catcalling her, yelling, "Muska!" from all directions. She didn't bother to turn and look. Beggars grabbed at her skirt, asking for coin, and market traders tried to force goods on her that she didn't need. They made it difficult for her to refuse, blocking her exit, so she had to push through them. Suddenly, she felt a force pulling her satchel away from her. She lifted her head and saw a man twice her age, yet twice as thin, trying to get her possessions. She felt sorry for the man, but struggled with him as passers-by ignored them. She heard someone behind her scream, "Hey!" The man released the satchel and ran in the opposite direction. Arda fell, her face hitting the muddy ground. The first thing she saw when she lifted her head was a pair of military boots. Two Amidian soldiers quickly brought her to her feet. Her face was muddied, and in the gloomy darkness she was sure she looked unrecognizable. One of the soldiers was polite enough to hand back her satchel and offer his help. He was a nice-looking young man and greeted Arda with a welcoming smile.
"Here's your bag, ma'am."
"Thank you," Arda quickly said and lowered her head before turning around. The soldier grabbed her arm.
"Apologies, ma'am, but I need you to stay here and make a report to my captain over the incident."
The soldier turned his head to face a captain in the distance and called out to him. As the captain started making his way to Arda and the soldier, she sneakily reached her hand into her satchel and grabbed several silver coins, then threw them haphazardly on the ground. The gleaming silver coins attracted every man, woman, and child who could see them. People dove into the mud between her and the soldier, seeking the silver coins and fighting for the possession of even one. Arda escaped the battling crowd and found herself in a quiet, empty alley. Clouds of smoke and the putrid smells of human waste made her gag. Swarms of flies buzzed around, and she batted the air to keep them away from the baby, who had started to cough more frequently. She rushed to get through the alley as quickly as possible when a man appeared around the corner. She lowered her head to hide her face, slowed her pace, and clutched her trusty spear, ready to strike if needed. As the man stepped closer, her heartbeat quickened. She began to play out various scenarios in her head. If he grabbed her arm, she could step on his toe. This wouldn't eliminate the danger, but it would distract him long enough that she could make a run for it. The man was now within arm's reach. She could see his brown eyes and scruffy beard. She was carefully scanning his clothes, looking for a glimpse of a knife or a dagger. Seconds felt like minutes. She slowed her pace further and was ready to use her spear, but the man simply walked past her. Arda remained cautious. She listened carefully, making sure the man wouldn't follow her or, worse, strike her from behind. He didn't. The steps grew more distant, and she was about to exhale with relief when she could no longer hear his footsteps at all. The man had stopped, and suddenly he let out one loud whistle. She turned around, staring at the man. He wasn't rushing to get her, but he was now strolling in her direction. She turned her head toward the end of the alley when 2 more men appeared, blocking her exit.
"Where are you going, sweetheart?"
a man behind her said. Arda was trapped, surrounded by 3 men and narrow walls. She frantically scanned her surroundings, looking for a way out. The narrow alley wouldn't allow her to use the spear to its full advantage. She was trapped, but not unarmed. An arm landed on her shoulders. She quickly shrugged it off and pointed the spear at the men, keeping them at bay as they continued to approach her.
"Nice toy."
The other 2 men laughed as their presumed leader spoke.
"We have shiny toys, too. But you don't want things to get nasty, do you?"
The leader of the group teased as each man slowly revealed his sharp dagger. "Leave now, and I won't hurt you," Arda advised as she pointed her spear at the leader of the group. All 3 men looked at each other and began laughing hysterically. To prove her point, Arda quickly extended the spear at the leader's face, but only managed to scratch his cheek. This got their attention, and the other 2 men stood in silence, looking at their leader and waiting for a response. "I am not joking," Arda stated firmly. The leader touched his cheek, noticed a smidge of blood on his fingers, and licked them.
"This is but a scratch."
The other 2 men laughed again.
You are a feisty bitch. I like that, he told her. Get her!
All three of the men advanced on Arda simultaneously. She began hurriedly whispering something under her breath.
Prayers are not gonna save you now, girl,
spat the man behind her as he covered her mouth. She bit his hand hard and swung her spear at the other two, stepping back until she was against the wall. Then a voice came deep from within the shadows, addressing all three men.
Have you ever heard the expression, yield to the desires of your body, then endure the troubles that follow?
Arda looked at the large figure stepping out of the shadows behind the men.
I am that trouble,
Balak told them, revealing his double-headed axe. Two of the men hid their weapons and vanished in a blink. The leader of the group watched his men run like cowards and turned to Balak.
She's all yours,
he blubbered and quickly ran to join his friends. Balak looked at Arda and slowly started making his way toward the elevator.
You coming?
He asked, waiting for her to catch up. Arda brushed herself off and rushed to join Balak. What made you change your mind?
Doesn't matter.
Well, I'm glad you did.
And Arda.
Yes, Balak?
Next time, aim for a kill.
I've never killed anyone.
Don't be soft on your enemies. They won't be soft with you.
Let's hope it doesn't come to that. 3 men worked the elevator from the bottom, and 3 more stood at the top. Its old wooden platform creaked as it traveled down to meet them. It was square, with a railing surrounding 3 of its 4 sides, but it still didn't look any safer. It rocked back and forth. They heaved ropes up and down, tying them to large metal rings when they were not in use. She waited patiently for the elevator to lower. It creaked and squeaked as it slowly dropped toward her. With a heavy sigh and one last glance at the strange city, she clambered onto the platform, using the stick of her spear to steady herself. When Balak stepped on, the platform rocked back and forth. "Slowly, please," she appealed to the men. The elevator started to rise, and Arda held on for dear life. As the air gradually cleared, she noticed that the infant's cough was subsiding. At the halfway point of the ascension, she gripped the rail on the landing with one hand and held the child close with the other. Balak sat down.
For you, brother,
he whispered to himself as he put an amulet in his pocket. As the bright light drew closer, he squinted and used his hands to shield his eyes. Arda recognized the dizzying sensation of vertigo and knew they were nearing the top. She didn't dare look down and busied her tongue to distract herself from the fear she might plummet to her death at any moment. The bulging satchel on her back was feeling heavy already. Horizontal journeys were difficult enough, never mind vertical excursions. She closed her eyes.
You know, you should really step off the platform with your eyes open,
Balak joked. It got much hotter and brighter as they headed higher and higher until finally they reached the exit. Balak growled and shielded his eyes, placing a palm over each. As it got lighter, Arda looked Balak up and down. He was wearing a heavy leather vest, adorned with flaps of chainmail and iron plates, but he wore no tunic underneath. His bare chest was exposed, his midriff bound tight in blood-darkened bandages a few days old. His eye was swollen, and his knuckles were red. "What happened to you?" she asked.
I fell.
Very funny. She narrowed her eyes at him in scorn. "The dressing will need changing on our trip, and soon. I can smell it from here." Over one shoulder he had slung an empty-looking leather satchel. Over the other, a rusted and dull yet formidable battle-axe dangled by a strap. A double-headed axe hung from his belt beside a goatskin flask. Arda looked down at the city she was leaving behind. "I hope I don't have to see that place again any time soon." Just below the exit hole were two large metal wheels attached to the rock ceiling with ropes dangling from steel hooks. "Is that what those elevators are attached to?" Arda asked. Balak nodded. "We're lucky to be alive."
"That's why I usually take the stairs."
The ends of the ropes were looped through barrel-shaped winches fixed to some boards. When she had first arrived, Arda had wondered what exactly the wheels were for, but had decided to take the stairs. The light got brighter as it shone through the hole and reflected onto the platform. Arda was enjoying the heat. It warmed her cheeks, and she could feel a gentle breeze entering the hole as they closed in on the top. The platform creaked its way to the top and rocked back and forth. Arda steadied herself and inhaled the fresh air. "Finally," she said with a sigh. As she made the leap from the platform onto the dusty surface, she brushed off her dress, looked up at the sunshine, and smiled.
"Arr!"
Balak growled as the sunlight shone with glaring intensity. He was blinded.